you guys have not seen this show before, I think we went live last month, Daniel.
Yep.
Daniel and I have come together to discuss philosophy and how how their philosophy pertains to modern day life now. Like what can we take from those things? How can we apply them? And just have like a really fun discussion on philosophy. Daniel has a master's in philosophy and I talk a lot. So, you know, with our powers combined, we have a podcast.
There's definitely no masters in anything. It's just a piece of paper. So Brooklyn, if anything, has a master's in life. So between the two of us, we just bring our life experiences together and see what we can throw out and what can work for everybody as well. So it's a great idea, and it's just a fantastic synthesis of two heads coming together. It's brilliant.
Um, the show's called The Philosophy Nook, right?
Hmm.
Okay, and we'll have some stuff on YouTube eventually, if we can get our technical stuff together.
Yeah.
Daniel and I sort of pick a topic, a theme, or a philosopher every podcast, and we have a discussion on that person or idea. And today's show is about Emmanuel Levinas. Levinas.
Yep.
Sorry.
Levinas.
20th
Perfect.
century philosopher. He
So
ethics as philosophy, as first philosophy.
yeah, you've done a bit of reading.
I'm prepared.
It's good. It's good. So yeah, Emmanuel Levinas, a 20th century philosopher. I suppose really is a 20th century philosopher because he was born in like 1906 and he died in the 90s. So he died age 91. So um, yeah, he really kind of was very much a product of the 20th century. But he has a lot to say about how people can get along with themselves and with each other, and how we need to change our relationships with people, which is great.
Yeah. He talks a lot about the other. Well, I mean, the things that I looked up about Levinas, he was really focused on the face of people. What are your thoughts? Like, what have you picked up on?
Yeah, he uses a specific like type of language where he talks about the face, and it's both symbolic and not symbolic. So like what when he talks about the face, he talks about how like when we encounter another person, and like what when he calls it the other, it just basically means another person. So when you come across the other and you meet their face, you meet the how they present themselves to you in your life, that's really important because the face calls you to respect them. It calls you to like recognize there's another person in front of you, and that person deserves respect and dignity that you can give them. And that's really the starting point of his philosophy, is that, when you walk into a relationship or walk into a shop or walk into an airport, when you meet a person, that person you meet presents them with their face, and that face calls forward a respect that they deserve. And that's the starting point of his philosophy. Yeah.
Intersubjectivity.
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah,
psychological
that's a big one.
relation between people. I never really considered that as a component of an interaction, but that's definitely a huge thing. The psychology of how two people respond to one another and
Yeah,
interact
yeah,
with that
it's
other
big.
experience, you know?
Yeah, it's a big one because in a type of philosophy called phenomenology, and basically the idea is that we have the objective. In other words, like objectivity. When you say to people, you need an objective opinion, or it means you need an outside opinion or an opinion from outside. And when you say subjective opinion, it means that it's your opinion. It's the opinion of a person, the opinion of the subject. So, but in some philosophies, like in Levinas, he says that there is no objectivity, there's only intersubjectivity. So when you say that, objectively, I can say that the color blue is blue, that's actually just a common agreement by everybody to call that pigment blue or that color blue. So it's not objectively blue, it's intersubjectively blue. It's commonly held. So that doesn't sound very important until you come down to things like relationships and how we live with each other and react to each other. So when people say objectively you need to obey your boss, no, that's intersubjective. That's just agreed by many subjects, many people. So it's not a fact. So that intersubjectivity thing is really important.
It is. How do you think that plays into how we interact with each, like what is the intersubjectivity of today? Like what are the big things that you feel people are uh, faced with in our current societies with technology and all of those things? Like how do you think the intersubjectivity has changed from the time of Levinas to the time of now?
Oh, hugely. Oh, Brooklyn, so much. And do you know what it's down to? It's down to the internet. The internet, for all we might criticize it about, it is the democratization of communications globally. So the internet allows people to voice their own views as subjects. So Levinas would probably, if he was around today, like he died in the early 90s, so he didn't experience the internet or web culture. So, but he would turn around and he would see, wow, there's no objectivity anymore. There's no truth. There's only intersubjectivity. There's only like commonly held beliefs that, there's no longer like a truth. There's 6 billion truths. However many people there are, that's how many truths there are. And we need to try and sift through on what and try and agree commonly among us all, like what do we agree is right or wrong or good or bad. And even look at, for example, recently in the United States with Roe Wade, that is it what's true, what's a fact, and what's wrong or right. We're turning around and we're seeing, no, what you think is a fact and what you think is right is not what I believe. The truth is what we all agree on, is what subjectively all Americans will agree is right for their country. And you'll see a groundswell of people coming out and saying the intersubjectivity of what we think on this is not what you think is the truth, because that truth is forced on us. And that's really important when it comes to things like rights of autonomy of body and relationships between people, even down to like relationships in marriage or in families and things like that. It affects people too, because the wider we get to know people and get to know different ideas, the more ideas we're bringing into ourselves to kind of educate ourselves and say, my subject is changing. The way I live my life is changing. And subjectivity is just a fancy word for saying, like, when you study a subject in school, it's like studying the subject of you for life. So your subjectivity is changing, it's a big one to unpack, but yeah, it's a great question, Brooklyn. Fantastic, because everything since the 90s and everything in the last 30 years has changed society totally. The world has totally changed in 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly has. And it just feels like we are so removed from one another. Like, I mean, with Levinas's idea that other is self, like, what did he say? Let's see. No, there's a quote, and I want to say it, so I'm going to find it. We've got time. We've got time.
Well, while you're looking for it, just might introduce the idea of the other. Is like originally it came from another philosopher who talked about how we relate to people, and how he brought it down to us like he called it I it and I you. When you like meet a person that you like and you get along with, you treat them as an I you. You say you are a good person, you are important to me. But when you walk into a shop and you say coffee 2 sugars black, you're not relating to a you. You're not relating to a person. You're relating to an it. That's an I it relationship. And what Martin Buber, is named this guy, says is, you know what? Don't be so disrespectful to human beings. Respect them, their dignity, their otherness, and respect that they're a you. Because at the end of the day, the total culmination of that is to treat people as objects. And that is what happened during the Holocaust, is where an entire race of people were treated as objects. Not even animals, just objects to be disposed of. Animals had better rights than Jews during the Holocaust. And people like Levinas, who was a Jew who lived during the Second World War, came up with this idea and said, no more will people be treated as objects. They'll be treated as subjects. Get rid of objectivity.
Yeah, the quote that I wanted to insert was the other is the other oneself. And I thought that was, like if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, like we're all just pieces of the same thing, or cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
It really is like this holy experience, like of experiencing another person, because you recognize on a soul level what they are, the fabric of source, the fabric of the universe, expressed as this individual thing. It's truly like, if you really want to get deep into it and really consider that, it's quite profound, and it would have to like affect the way that you see other people and how you feel about other people and how you want to express kindness to other people. It's like, wow, this is what an amazing opportunity, and I just think that, especially like with a computer and feeling like, oh, we're just these screen names and these icons, we're just like, nothing's real. I can say what I want. I can treat people the way I want. It's like, we're just playing around, and it's not. We lost that connection to the soul experience, I guess. So
Yeah.
So I think that when he says the face, when you see the face, it's almost like when you recognize that soul looking back at you, whoa, like that has to change it into something else. That it makes you responsible in a way. I think that's like how he expressed it. It was like, you have a responsibility to this person now, to this thing, because you recognize what they are. That was quite nice.
Yeah, no, it's beautifully put, and I love that quote. The question then, because as you say, he says it's ethics is first philosophy. So philosophy means love of wisdom, but what Levinas actually wanted to do was turn that on its head and say, no more of this. It's not love of wisdom anymore. It's wisdom of love, and we need to teach ourselves this. And it was one of his famous quotes: "Not love of wisdom, wisdom of love." And we need to concentrate on this. That what can we find in the wisdom of love? And not romantic love, but love as in kindness, goodness towards others, and how it can, if we truly recognize the other person as truly other, and don't try to grab them, don't try to control them, but respect their dignity as other, then we begin to understand the true nature of existence, and how we fit in all this, and how we can relate to people a little more healthier as well. It's not an understatement to say that what Levinas is proposing as a philosopher is a complete rehaul of human interrelations and how we get along with each other. He basically just said, hey, here, hold on, guys. We've been doing this wrong for a few thousand years. We got to just do it. We got to scrap it all and start again. We got to be more respectful. We got to be kinder. We got to stop treating each other as objects. And his books go into detail in how to do that, intricate detail. So I have to, like, as a 21-year-old reading it, 20 years ago, it was absolutely, life-changing for me. I started living differently. I started experiencing people a little bit differently as well, and myself too, because when you're doing that, you also have to look in the mirror and you see your own face and realize that don't disrespect yourself with putting labels on yourself or trying to, what he calls, interpersonal imperialization, where you try to colonize yourself with ideas and labels and confine yourself. Respect yourself as truly other,
Yeah. He said something that I really liked. He said, "For others, in spite of myself, from myself."
From myself.
Wow. Like, that feels like the creed of all humans. Like, that's what we should say to ourselves every morning when we wake up. It's such a... I don't even know. I mean, just such a fully giving statement, like, for others, from myself, in spite of myself. Like, I totally get that. I don't know, for me, it's like, be of service to others. Look to others as, like, opportunities to be kind and giving and loving and all of these wonderful things, in spite of the shortcomings of myself, in spite of my selfishnesses or, whatever. I offer this to you. And that's just like, I don't know, it warmed my heart. And I'm like, yeah. That's people I feel are always really tight about that. It's like, well, I'm not gonna do that because, everybody else sucks. And if if I'm just out here giving and then they're just taking and I'm angry about that. And I totally get that. It's just like, why put in so much effort for people who aren't going to reciprocate? But at a certain point, like it's like you have to be wise yourself. Like, don't just go out there being a fool. um, but from a very authentic place, be open to be of service to one another. And it's an individual responsibility. If every single person adopted that, then everybody would be doing it. But you have to do it first, and you can't look to other people to adopt that before you. Like, why would you say, well, yeah, I believe in being a better person, but you be a better person first. If you be a better person first, then I'll be. But everybody's doing that, and so no one is. And it's like that personal accountability. You have to have you have to take accountability for your character and for, for what you're putting out in the world. And you can't complain about other people doing it if you yourself are contributing to it in some way. And contributing not just actively, but passively by not countering it with something positive.
Yeah. One of the parts I love most about that is the words "in spite of myself." It's to kind of remind you not to kind of remove the ego when you're relating to people. That sometimes the ego is useful. I'm sure it's here for a reason, but when you're relating with other people, and particularly when it comes to Levinas, you got to get rid of it. You've got to not get rid of it, but you've got to, let's say, not let your ego be the driving force when you're relating with to other people, because it removes the ego is there as like a self-defense. It's there as a tool for us to survive. I will be the best, I will achieve, I will get this, I will get that. It's the focus on the I, and it's a good tool for particular uses, but when it comes to relating to other people, it's probably the wrong tool to use. It's, I don't know, it's like using a hammer to sand something. It's just not the right tool to use the ego when you're relating to someone that you're supposed to be utterly recognizing towards and utterly, like, infinitely respecting. And that's how you should relate to people, is that number one, you recognize them and their dignity, and number two, you cherish them as other than yourself. And that brings us to one of my favorite quotes is, if one could possess, grasp, and know the other, it would not be the other. So the minute you start doing that, the minute you start grasping and understanding and putting labels on another person, you lost them. The minute that you love someone and you meet them and you cherish them and the two of you are fantastically in love with one another, and the minute that that person becomes wife or husband, that label is what you cherish. So many people in this world fall in love with the idea of being in love as opposed to actually loving the person. So it's labels sometimes that pose this ego tool to put on other people, and they fall in love with the idea of a wife, of a partner, of a boyfriend, of a girlfriend, of a mother, a daughter, a husband, a brother. They fall in love with these labels, and when the person changes or grows beyond the label you've put on them, you say, oh, you've changed, you're not the same person anymore. The problem is they are the same person they always were, but they were other than you, and your labels have to change to keep up with that. Or in fact, don't use them. Don't put a label on them, because they're disrespectful. It's a violent tool that we do in our interpersonal relationships. We demand that that person live up to the responsibilities of what I call husband, what I call brother, what I call wife. And those labels have demands. And as we just go back to our original point, if nothing's objective, it's intersubjective, then we have to say that those labels are just agreed at positions in society. They're not truths. The idea of a wife, the idea of a brother, they're not truths. They're commonly held social practices that we put on other people. And those things, they don't do us any favors when we're trying to respect a person as truly other. And this is all the heart of Emmanuel Levinas as a philosopher.
Now, are you in agreement in this day and age that having a label for someone is a violent act on them in some way? Like, how do you feel about that?
It's a hard one. I think, like, ultimately, I would love to live in a world that we can reach where yes, I can say that. But we live in a world where we need to use these things to get by. It's very hard for me. And Martin Buber recognizes this as well. When he said about you got to relate to people, who work in the coffee shop. Well, I can't go into the coffee shop and order my coffee and spend my entire time being 100% there for the person who's giving me coffee, because I wouldn't have anything left to give of myself. But we need to work towards that. But yeah, I do feel that if the weight of the label outweighs my respect for the other, it's violent, and I don't agree with it. So, for example, if I was in a relationship, or if I'm in I don't mean like a romantic relationship. It could be a relationship with a parent, a relationship with a sibling or a friend, and if my expectations as a result of them being that thing outweighs the actual respect I have for that person, I need to sit down and have a conversation with myself and with them and say, you know what, where are we? Maybe we've transitioned to something else, or I'm very sorry that maybe I've put expectations on you. So the labeling can be quite dangerous, and I do think I wouldn't go so far as to use the word violent, but certainly I'd be slightly in agreement with it that, and in my own life I do say that sometimes people use labels violently on other people to enslave them, to shackle them into their own lives and their own expectations that their ego needs for security.
I don't know. I mean, like, I feel that I I guess I just don't think that there's so much a problem with having a label, as it's just part of, oh, my name is Brooklyn. Like, it's not really a violent attack on me as my spirit. Like, it's only when my understanding, I would say, is when we take the label and we have this preconceived idea, this script that must play out that goes with that label, and we don't allow the person any space to be who they are. They must play a part of our role that we've given them. And if they do not keep playing the role, then, as the director that we're trying to be, cut, you're not doing the right thing. Do it again, or you're fired. I think it's really the belief behind what that label is, because when you really understand that a person, a soul, is this it's this unspeakable, like, beautiful piece of the universe. When you know that, you can say, yeah, that's my mom or that's my dad, without it corrupting your understanding of who they are, because you're just now using the language of the day. You're just participating in the culture of, this is how we know each other. This is, our relationship on this physical world, but, like, yeah, there's a much deeper understanding there. And so once you truly adopt that truth inside of you, it really doesn't matter what you call things, because you're not lost in the idea of what that is supposed to be, like this illusion that some people create around that. So I think probably just, like, the idea that these labels mean something is the violence, is the limitation that we're putting on each other.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that, and it's important probably we don't get too focused on labels, but it is really, especially in this day and age, in the last 5-10 years, it's really important to address the idea of labels, because it's really contentious. But one of the things that I suppose comes across is that in Levinas, labels are sometimes necessary tools, so we use these tools to kind of put a word or a definition on a commonly held agreement of how we relate to one another. So, we're friends. That word is a label, but it also carries with it a weight of how we get along, our expectations towards one another, things like that. So, and it's a good guide, it's a good tool. However, and it can be beautiful. It can be, for example, when people love and cherish each other, it can become very, very meaningful. And some labels can be beautiful tools to kind of encapsulate or describe or poetically describe a really indescribable emotion like love or adoration or parenthood or something like that. And that's great. But Levinas's point of view is that that's all good and that's the positive. But guys, you're kind of forgetting that the negative is what I lived through is Germany, 1939 to 1945, where labels were used for something that was a little bit worse, where racism was there, with where we call people by a different nation less because when I say the word Jew, it means less person, and that's what Levinas was driving at. Is that um, we use these tools for great benefit, and hammers are fantastic for building houses. But when someone, as a result of their misguided ego, uses the same hammer to smash someone's head in, then we need to reassess hammers. And that's kind of what he's saying. We need to reassess our use of labels. Until we know how to use labels responsibly and we don't use them to shackle people into conceptions of interrelations, then we need to maybe put them aside and reassess them and just put a check on how we relate to people. And Levinas is trying to do that. He's trying to say ethics is first philosophy. Ethics is where we begin. We have to start from scratch, but start with ethics, not from use. In the beginning, when people started interacting, it was an interaction of use. How can I use you? How can you use me? Let's trade, let's barter, let's get along and see how we can make each other better by swapping goods or by exchanging, what we need. But now it needs to be something different. It needs to be ethics. It needs to be, how can I benefit you? You call out in me respect and dignity. So I need to be there for you, as opposed to how can you be there for me? And that's where we get the ethics as first philosophy.
And I think it was his quote or his saying or stance on it that ethics is not grounded in rationality, but in the responsibility to others, or it deals with the description of our responsibility toward others, something like that. So like our ethics isn't based on any sort of rational like thing. It should be looked at as how should we be treating each other? What is that responsibility to that infinitely other?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that we really don't feel like we have responsibility to one another now. It's very much me first. Take care of me, you take care of you. It's not my job to take care of you. And like when I say take care of, I think people have this idea that it's like you're supporting someone else's life. Like you're writing checks for them to go like do things. And it's not that. It's just simply like on a spiritual or emotional or like this very non-physical level, just being there for another person by being helpful if you see someone in need of like, oh, can I help you pick that up? You're struggling. I asked a lady, she was trying to like get a box down at Home Depot at the hardware store. And I was like, do you need help? She was like, oh, thank you. But it was like, yeah, like, I don't know. She kind of looked a little startled, but I'm like, everybody, like, whenever, this should be a very common thing. Like,
Why? Why did you help her?
I helped her because she didn't look like she had it. And I don't know. I think that personally, if I were struggling, it would be nice for someone to help me. But it was just like, you see it and there's just a response. That's all I can really say. It's like, I don't know. It's just a natural
So,
reaction, right?
so, so Brooklyn, that is exactly what Levinas calls the call of the face. That you saw her face. It doesn't mean a face, but it mean you saw a human soul, a human person in need, and it called you out of yourself. In spite of yourself, for others. And that's
Sort of
beautiful.
like recognizing that we are this, it's not like I saw someone, it's like, oh, I have no connection with that. I don't know what that is.
Mm.
You recognize a part of yourself in that, your humanness in that, or your soul level connection with whatever that person is. And I think it's really important to talk about that because when we don't develop that sort of understanding with other people, that's where we are unable to get into a position where we see the importance of that. Because there are people who see other people and they're just like, and so what? I don't care. I will watch you get hurt and I'm going to pull out my phone. Like, it's not real to me. And I don't know what it would take for people to take that individual responsibility to go within and work on themselves in a way where they could get to that point, because it's not something you can really teach in a classroom. Honestly, when I was teaching, I was working with preschoolers. They have this high level of like compassion for others, and like I've seen children who get hurt, and then another one comes over and it's like, oh, it's okay, and they try to comfort them, and it's just this very beautiful thing. But it gets, I don't know where we lose it, like where.
Well, you actually you really hit on something I wanted to raise is that I believe that we're all naturally born giving and caring for one another, and somehow we unlearn it along the way. And it comes right back to something I've always said is that, when we grow up and when we're educated, we're taught how to live life, but not why to live life. And in the how, in the rationale, we sometimes lose our way and we're taught you need to look after yourself, you need to look for security, you need to get a job, it's almost like a kind of a survivalist or defensive mode of existence. And the more that is put into children, the more they grow into these functioning adults who are in corporate business making the kill. And that's not how we were in our natural state. It's not how we were when we were born. We naturally are giving. Children are so kind to each other until later on when they begin to develop those tendencies. So yeah, I totally agree with you that when you see that in children, it's so heartwarming, and you go, ah, why can I be more like that? Well, you just forgot, or you unlearned it. We can relearn that. And Levinas is calling us forward to relearn the true nature of the human soul. There's a reason why we're called humane beings. We just forgot the humanity of our humanness.
He says that, I'm actually gonna read it so I don't mess it up. Okay, so there are two different things. It says the other is our first source of our sensation and awareness of the world, which makes sense. Like when you're first born, there's some other out there that is like, interacting with you, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm here. And it says we can only develop a sense of ourselves because of our encounters with others. So that's true. For me, that feels true. Like, you really only experience yourself or develop who you are when you interact with other people, and you can kind of like see yourself through their eyes, and those sorts of lessons. But I guess my point was when how do we do that now with the way that we live? We don't. It's like we live in a time where everyone has an opinion. Everyone's opinion is correct. Everyone is like in their own little castle, and I am totally equally as guilty of this because I'm the introvert who never leaves the house. You know. So where can we, living the way that we live today, post pandemic, come together and really have those sorts of experiences with other, you know?
Well, I think there's probably just three short points to raise in light of what you just said that pop into my head, if that's okay. Um, so the first one is that I genuinely believe he's very correct that you're born into the other, that your first encounter with the world is the other. Even before you're born, the first thing you experience is nourishment and being cherished by your mother, by the womb. In yourself, you would develop from the other, and when you begin to become conscious in the womb, you're getting nourishment and food on a regular basis. Even if there's harsh noises or silence outside, you're still getting food and you're still getting nourishment from the other. So the other is a positive, dignified, cherishing, nourishing thing. And that's how you're born. You're born into a world where you've been cherished and you've been nourished, even if it is just biological. Nonetheless, you enter into a world. And the first thing, hopefully, most of us will experience is a cherishing and nourishing mother and parents and family. And hopefully that's it. Now, where do we unlearn that? Where do we unlearn the love that we experience as a child? And how do we relearn, as you say, how do we relearn it? And there's two ways that I often think about how to do this. The first one is the eyes of another person. It's so strange, but how how often do we look at other people's faces or at other people's eyes on a regular basis? You go through a day and think, how many times can you count how many times you've looked at another person's eyes or face? Now let me ask you this again. How many times in the last 10 years have you sat down with a person and you looked into that person's eyes for 60 seconds without break? Unless it's a staring contest. And that, strangely enough, that really actually undoes a lot of the learning that we do. It undoes a lot of the, I suppose, bad learning we take on, because it forces us to recognize this person is other, and this person is a whole other universe in themselves, other than me. And it's amazing. This person is a whole other human being, and you're looking into their eyes, recognizing this fact. And it's really powerful because, they say the windows are the eyes of the soul. Well, you're looking through that window and you're seeing soul. And it's amazing what you can do. And there are certain, cognitive behavioral therapy sessions where they'll ask people to sit down and look into each other's eyes and say certain things or ask certain questions without looking away. And it's a real bonding session, and it's amazing to do that. But the second way, and this is really nice, I think, is what you done in Home Depot, is simply help another person. And it reignites something within the human being, that we belong with one another, that we live in a world that's a little bit warmer than colder, that's a little bit hopeful and optimistic, instead of this cold and shallow place that we're always told is, you gotta survive and it's a hard world out there. Well, you know what? Maybe it's a hard world when you can't reach that box in Home Depot, but it's a little bit warmer every time someone gives you a hand. Anytime I feel down or angry or something, I do a random act of kindness. It doesn't have to be giving money charity or something. It could be as simple as helping a snail off the road that might be crushed or something like that. Just any piece of kindness makes me belong in the world. It brings me home to the other and makes me feel like the world is actually a little bit warmer today. And it's that connectivity to the other. It's that calling out of yourself and away from from that totalizing, that helps you to become a little bit better in yourself. So I think that's one of the ways, yeah.
Now, you talked about looking people in the eye, and I think that's really a powerful thing to do, because when you're connected with someone, looking them directly in the eyes, that's when the illusion of the labels fall away and you really see them as what they are. And I've had that experience of like, whoa, like I just kind of like had this idea of you, but now that I'm looking at you, it's like, oh, there's somebody real behind the curtain, like. Which is very interesting, and I think everyone should do it more often. But I do find that there are people who are not confident enough to maintain eye contact. It makes people very uncomfortable if they're not ready to receive a deep connection. Um,
Is that the ego fighting? And saying,
I do feel like
whoa,
it.
you're too close to the other.
It's like to me, it feels like they don't want to be seen. Truly, they want to hide behind the label. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have
Mm-hmm.
you ever
I,
experienced that? I do. Because I like to look people in the eye. That's what I was always taught to do. But it feels more authentic. Like I'm looking at you. I am. um,
yeah.
and when people start, this is making me uncomfortable. Like giving all the signs. I'm like, okay, then I try not to do it. But I see that there's something in them that isn't ready for that connection,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine, but I don't know.
You have that, and I suppose this is bring it back to who we're speaking about at the minute. It's just the 20th century philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. Um, so to bring it back to him again, I suppose it is about how you interact with people. And like you say, Brooklyn, when you look a person in the eye, like even if you're going in to order a coffee and you look a person in the eye, there is that connection. There's that brief connectivity. And no human can do that without being affected in some way. Eye contact is so beautifully important between people that without it, we'd be so disconnected. So this idea of in Emmanuel Levinas of recognizing the face, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about looking at a person so much and so deeply that they actually, it smashes all the labels. It smashes any kind of idea of, labelizing that person and boxing them and saying, actually, you know what? You're another person, wholly other person. And I know it's like one of those common expressions, if you really love someone, you have to set them free. Well, really, that's Levinas. If you love someone, and you should try and love everyone, you need to set them free. They're utterly and always free beyond you. Don't bind them. Don't bond them. You need to understand that people are individuals, deserve their freedom, deserve their own autonomy as a human being. And when you look into another person's eyes, recognize that. And that's how you develop deeper, more cherishing, and more meaningful relationships with people around you.
I feel like I want to clarify. Like, I know that there are some people who use eye contact as a way to intimidate other people or to do like a power play, like the stare down. And I think that beyond eye contact, you have to focus on love or kindness. You have to first have that energy, and then it communicates through the eyes. Everything starts from within. I mean, like labels, eye contact, any action that we do, even if it's considered good or bad or neutral or whatever, it's really intention. And we have to pay more attention to what our intention is. And going into a coffee shop and feeling warmth and kindness to the person who's helping you, feeling their value, feeling their worthiness as another piece of the universe, another piece of God that we're looking into. The conversation is authentic, it is full of love, it is I see you, it is the namaste in action. But none of it really matters until you really sit with yourself and decide and discover. I don't want to say decide, because if you don't, if you're, it's not just a knowledge thing. It's a wisdom thing. You have to truly feel it in your heart and truly be. You have to live it. It has to become you. Because if it's not, then it's not really authentic. It's sort of something that you're trying, but who knows how I feel in 5 minutes.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's so important that when you do these things, whether it's the coffee shop or the marriage or something like that, when you're engaging with the other person, if you're trying to do this piecemeal or you're trying to, do you know what, I'll give this a go. This will be my daily practice. I'll choose this person and I'll bring myself to them with good intention. Well, that's not good enough. That's not good intention. It has to saturate your soul because, when it comes to relating to other people, it's not just an investment. You're not taking a little bit of yourself and investing it in others. You're bringing your whole self to another, and you're saying, all of me is here for all of you. And it's again, come back to that one beautiful word that you mentioned there, namaste. Which is the soul in me recognizes the soul in you. Recognizes, doesn't own, doesn't label, just recognizes. And I love that word, recognizes, because recognition is something where it's like a passing thing that you don't try and grab it. You just go, I see you. Yeah, I see you. Yep. I see me. I see you. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's essentially what we should be trying to do is not use it as a hobby. And so much in especially in personal development circles these days, the last 10, 20 years, they have these ideas that, look, if you do X, Y, and Z once a day, you'll be a better person. But in actual fact, instead of actually doing it as if it's like a piece of exercise or that, try and do it like it's breathing. Make it a part of who you are, not a part of what you are. Because at the end of the day, then you'll never have to try because it's who you are. And it's not like you're going against your nature, because it is at the heart of everyone, within everyone's nature, to be caring toward each other. Because that's how we're born. We're born cared for and caring.
I feel that our culture of always being in a rush, always being very busy, takes us away from taking the time to really sit with another human and sit with them in their sadness or in their joy, celebrate with them in their joy, without having some sort of selfish agenda of getting something done on our end. Yeah, I'll go to your birthday party. I want to have a good time. But will you sit with me quietly and just enjoy the sound of the breeze through the trees because I just want to sit in someone's company? It's like 10 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
We don't really, and I don't think that it's our faults in a way because we live in this system that has measured us by our productivity or whatever. But I think it's important to take a step back and realize that there is spaciousness for giving our time or truly being truly present with another person. I actually had this experience on Monday. I had to go to my parents' house to get a few of my things, and my little cousin was there, and she had this little bead kit, like beads with string and things, and she was like, "Can you make a bracelet with me?" And I was like, "I'm actually getting getting ready to get back on the road." And then I got distracted doing something, and then she asked me again, and so I said, "Yeah, I can sit with you, and I can do this," even though I didn't really want to. But as we were working on our bracelets, I realized how important it was for her to just sit with someone because she's the only kid there. It's summertime and she's just cooped up with, the old people. And I'm sure it really meant something to her to have had that time. And it ultimately meant something to me. Like, I didn't realize the value that was there until I really just, like, allowed myself to sit down and do it. And it really touched me. And I have my bracelet, and every time I love wearing it, and every time I look at it, I think of that moment, and that's something that we'll always share together. So just realizing that you can stop and smell the roses with other people. It's safe to do that. I don't think that some people feel like they feel like if I stop, then all of my plates are going to fall. But it's not really that way. Or maybe just work on creating a life where you have the time to joyfully give with others,
I think one of the greatest gifts you can give is the present of your presence, and to be present with a person. As you say, not just go to the birthday party, but, some of the nicest times I've ever spent with people, we've literally we haven't done anything. We've just been in each other's company. And there's so many times, and I laugh at this, there's so many friends and loved ones and that we find excuses to spend time together, and they're just vehicles, not the journey. The journey is, how we are together and what we're doing to relate to one another and being present with each other. And this society has this obsession with, oh, what did you do with this person? Oh, well, we went for a drive and we went for a hike and we went for a picnic. Or what did you do with this person? We did nothing. We just sat in each other's company. What? And it's so, even when you go for a drive with a person, the drive is actually secondary. It's the company that's important. And that's really one of the things in healthy relationships that I think people need to kind of reintroduce or reinvite into their lives, is to say that I'd like to spend time, not, it's like this thing with relationships recently, like having date night, it's not, it's not date, it's company. It's where you put it, you hit pause on everything else in your lives. You say, I want to spend time with you. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter what we're doing, as long as we're present to each other. And that's really, really important for people in relationships. And it's unusual that, during COVID, for example, especially people who live together. Now, I was in bliss because like yourself, I live on my own, like in a little cottage. I had no problems in lockdown. Lovely garden and everything here in Ireland. But, it was a lot of people, found it difficult because suddenly they went from spending, getting up in the morning at 7 or 8, going to work, and then coming home from work at 5 or 6, and then they spend time with the children, and then they might, do chores until 10 o'clock or whatever, and then they might spend an hour or two watching TV or reading or something, and then they go to bed together. And when in that period do, husbands and wives spend time together. Any couple spend time together. And then when COVID hit, suddenly everyone's present to each other. It's incredible, and at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been such a shock to the system, I think, for a lot of people who said that they felt overwhelmed at spending a lot of time with these few individuals. Wow, imagine you were shocked at having to spend time with your own family. Now, what kind of society we're living in that it's a shock to actually spend time with your family? That's, and I think we need to gift ourselves back exactly what you just said with, was it your niece? Your cousin. Yeah. So you gift, that's what we need to do. Gift ourselves that time where we just sit down with our loved ones and just spend time together. And that's something I think it's not just for them, but it helps us too.
It's almost like putting aside our egoic agendas for a moment, putting us away for a minute to to overflow with someone else. I was actually reading something and it was like normalize just like everyday things, doing everyday things with people. Like call your friend up and say, I have to get my pants tailored. Do you want to tag along? And they just come with you and you just hang out. You're just together and you're sharing the beauty of the mundane together. We don't I don't think I would ever call my friend and say, "Would you like to come with me to get my car washed?" She'd be like, "Why would I do that? I'm doing something else." Yeah, I mean, like anybody, but yeah, we have to
Well,
sort of like change our idea of having to have some sort of end result or like end goal or what's in it for me type of deal, and
mhm.
just be selfless.
Well, you know what? That comes right back to what Socrates said of beware the barrenness of a busy life. I love that expression. That expression for me is something that I've really tried to live in the last 5 years. A few years ago, I used to be a politician, and I used to pack my life full of stuff and go, if I'm not busy, if my agenda isn't full, I'm not a fulfilled person. And I didn't have a life. And it's amazing that so many people do that, they have to be busy, they have to be at things. So taking that time to stop, to hit pause, to cherish the slowness of time, and to say to friends, you know what? I'm actually doing nothing. Do you want to come and do nothing together? That's a gorgeous idea. Beautiful idea. And there's nothing. Every single day, I have a dog, and I spend time where I just simply stop and say, I'm doing nothing with this dog for at least 15, 20 minutes. At least. I don't mean going for a walk. I don't mean playing ball. I don't mean just literally sitting with the dog and petting the dog. Nothing else. It calms her down, it calms me down, and it's a beautiful exercise. And it's simply to bring me back to the present and say that, you know, we all need this space in our lives. We all need this kind of antidote to being so busy and too busy. My dad, he was an addict to being busy. He was like a workaholic. He needed to be out in the morning straight away, and when he came home, he would be fixing the house or he'd be doing jobs for friends or other people. And at the end of the day, like, he was working up until the week before he passed away. He was cleaning gutters and painting the house and fixing things. And I mean, that's lovely, it's fantastic, but there was no room made for presence. There was no room made for silence, solitude, for reflection, for just having a moment to say, actually, what is my life? Why am I living my life? What am I doing? How am I spending time? What do I love? Do I cherish the flowers opening more? And these things are lovely to do, but sometimes you run away from them into a busy life, into a barren, busy life.
It's sort of like how we were talking about having labels on other people and having these ideas and holding them to these ideas. Busyness, this idea that we have, is really just sort of being absorbed in our own labels that we put on ourselves. Would you say?
Mm.
You know,
Oh,
I
absolutely.
I am this person at this job, and this is what I do, and these are all the things that I have to get done. And then at home, this is who I am, and these are my roles and responsibilities. And you're just so absorbed in all the all the little things that you tell yourself you are, and you forget the vastness of your identity.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And to link us back with Levinas, the philosopher we're discussing, His main work was totality and infinity. And the whole idea behind that is the other person is infinite. And we totalize them with labels. We say the totality of you is you are a husband, you are a brother, you are a wife, you are a whatever. And that's totalizing, where we totalize a person, label them, and put them in a box. And the total existence of them is that box. But in actual fact, as you say, Brooklyn, we do that as much to ourselves as we do to other people. We put ourselves in these little boxes to say, I am this and I am that. A lot of people who love that security, and it gives them solidity. And quite frequently, a lot of people who have midlife crises are people who are turning around saying, I've been working 20, 30 years in this job, and I've been doing this and that. Is this really me? They begin to actually question the boxes. And they begin to realize, because deep down, back when they were children, they were infinite. They were infinitely other. The horizon was wide open. And they realize when they hit 40, 45, 50, something wakes up in them and says, did you forget to be other? Did you forget that you were infinite? That you had infinite possibilities of who you could be? Did you narrow yourself to these things? So, yeah, we do this to ourselves. And your very first question about the violence of labels, we do it to ourselves. We violate our own respect by shackling ourselves with these labels. And I think we would do ourselves a great justice if we loosened those shackles a little bit and allow us to be free in our expression and realize how beautifully wide open our potential is to be as many different possibilities of ourselves as we can. It's lovely.
That's why I feel like it's really important to have a meditative practice, especially at the beginning of the day, to center yourself in remembering that. So then as you move through your day, you don't get caught up in that illusion. Um,
Yeah.
there's a quote that I want to know what you think of, because I've been looking at it and I really don't know what I get from this. Levinas says the very relationship with the other is the relationship with the future. What does that mean to you?
I think it's I I think, now this is my interpretation of it, and probably kind of slightly informed by my reading of him, is that the past is something that's fixed, and the present is something that's fleeting. It's gone immediately, but the future is infinite. The future is wide open. The future is anything. It's all possibilities. It's not written, and so for Levinas, the other is always future. The other is always something that is beyond us. It's beyond the present. It's beyond trying to capture or write in stone like we can in the past. So when it comes down to the future, and I think there's a slightly double meaning to this particular quote, and it's why a lot of people pick this one quote out. Number one, that's this one meaning. The second, more subtle meaning is that I think he was pointing at the idea that his philosophy could be a key to saying that if we change civilization, if we change the way that we relate to one another, in actual fact, it won't be the I, it won't be the ego that is society, that is how we live. It will be the other person. It will be infinitely the other. So our future as a people and how we relate to each other will be the other. And I think that's what he was looking at. He was looking to try and show us a way forward. Philosophers sometimes have a tendency, like Nietzsche had this tendency, to try and, now they hold back a lot and they say, no, no, I'm not. But they sometimes have this tendency to almost be like a prophet and say, this is how it should be. And this is how I'd like it to be. But 20th century philosophers were very careful not to do this, and Levinas especially. So I think he was probably hinting at it, that this is what it could be. The future could be the other. The future is not the I, not the ego, it's the other. And I think that's probably where he's going with that one. That's only my own interpretation.
I can see that. Sort of like the way you perceive other is ultimately the way you will experience the world. Is that what?
Yeah, yeah. It's also, I suppose, from the point of view of Levinas, it's also the point of view that in the future, starting now, and like you said earlier on, you need to make a stand. You need to decide to be kind today. You can't wait on other people to be kind. You need to try and do it now yourself. Likewise, that's exactly what he's talking about. The future is other. You need to decide right now to be kind, so the future will be kind. And I often say that the other is kindness. If kindness cannot exist in a vacuum. Kindness can't exist with you on a desert island. Kindness can only exist in the intersubjective. It can only exist in relation to other people. And the future is other, means the future is kind. It's a living verb. Kindness is not a thing. Like love is not a thing. It's not an object. It's a verb. It's not a noun. So at the end of the day, we need to begin realizing that that's our future. If we're to have any hope, especially, the way the world is today, and the way you've got a breakdown of some societal values, and you've got a breakdown of religion, you've got a breakdown of like even states, and you've got war, and things are feeling a little bit unstable for the first time in 40, 50 years, and people are a little bit scared. We need that optimistic voice to say that, what, the future is other. We need to be more kind. Amid the turmoil of all that's happening, choose kindness in your everyday life, and that will filter through.
Do you really feel like kindness can't exist without other?
Sorry, say that again?
You said kindness cannot exist without other.
Kindness is, I think it's like kindness is like a paint, and the other is a canvas. And you can practice kindness in a garden towards the flowers, and you can help the snails, but again, they're others. You're helping somebody, you're being present for someone, and you can be kind to yourself. um yeah, I'm kind of arguing with myself here. You've caught me in a bit of a trap.
Well, no,
um
I
yeah, no,
apologize.
no.
I wasn't trying to catch you up. I was just thinking,
This is
like,
thoughtful.
what comes first? Is kindness only in existence when it is in action, or are you first kind inside of yourself in order to express that? Is kindness a secondary expression to who you are already? Like a
I
kind
think
person, is a person only kind when they're actively being kind toward other? Or is it just part of their being?
this is only my own idea. I don't know if it's true or not, or what is truth. But I think that kindness, I think people are naturally kind. Yeah, I think we're born kind, like we were saying earlier. But I think kindness is an action in that it needs to connect with the other for it to become real. In the same way that, the whole idea of, does a tree make a sound if it falls in a forest and no one is around? You know, sound relies on the interpretation of a person to hear it. Kindness, we will absolutely radiate kindness, no problem from birth. If we're raised in a barrel and not knowing anyone, we'll still have kindness. We'll still be kind to people around us. But kindness is something that is intersubjective. So for it to grow, for it to realize itself, kindness needs to engage with other people, and it thrives on other people. So I think it's kindness is probably our way of becoming better people in ourselves through others. It's the perfect antidote to the ego. What do you think?
I'm sort of digesting everything that you just said. Kindness. I feel that I'm not quite sure how to put it. It's almost like this concept of other exists so that you can experience the effects of your actions in this physical place, and vice versa. The way that we learn that things aren't nice, things are, what is kind, what does kindness feel like, what do all of these things mean, why do they matter? It's like every action that we do toward one another is continually helping everyone have a clear understanding of these concepts, and and teaching us how to be, why it's important to be kind. Oh, it feels good when someone was kind to me. Kindness, that's kindness. So now I feel what kindness is. Now I can, now feeling kind, I can in turn try to help someone else feel that way. Like it's this, it's instilling in us the wisdom of what these things really are. Like we would never be able to do without the other. So I suppose when you say kindness can't exist without other, I do agree with that, as well as anything. Nothing can exist without other, because without it we are unstimulated. We are just sitting still. um, and even though
It's
those
unreal.
things are inside of us, they can't be cultivated. It's the cultivation of
Yeah.
those things that is requiring other, I suppose.
Kindness is a seed, but it can only become a plant with the water of the company of the other. And it's just something that I think that I feel is that we're all kind, but kindness does require the stimulus of the other person to ensure that it grows and becomes its best part, you know?
I feel like there are so many kind people. I feel like there is kindness in the world. I do believe there is good in the world. Moji says, remind the world how good it is, not how bad it is. And I think that's very important. I don't think I'm asking the right question. um, how can we, I don't want to say how can we be more kind in this time, because we are kind. There are many kind people. I'm sure most people that you interact with on a daily basis are kind. What is it you think that we could do to cultivate more responsibility to others and on an emotional level, not just being kind, but just like how do we do these things over the internet nowadays? How do we expect people to feel this way or to recognize these things when we don't relate the same way that Levinas related to people? And I know we kind of talked about this before, but I feel like there's a quality that we're overlooking. Like we're kind of like rushing into the future, and we're really not considering other as an equal important thing that we interact with. We sort of just see other as there's just so many people in the world and I'm fighting through, and the competition and with the internet there's the competition is even more, because everyone now has this equal footing, so to speak, on certain platforms, and it's like everyone, it feels like, what is the motivation to be kind to others in a society that we're living in today? What would be a realistic thing to say to someone? Like, convince me. Why should I be kind to other people? I don't need people to do anything for me. I've got everything online. I can outsource everything and just like have these interactions. Hire someone on
Yeah,
Fiverr to create my logo, and I don't even have to talk to a person.
there's no reason at all. Um, there's no reason at all why you should be kind, but kindness is every reason. I know it sounds like a cliche or something that I picked up from a card or something, but what I mean is that when you're kind, it makes you feel better. And that's not just like a chemical stimulus that happens to encourage us to be kind, to try and encourage us to be better people or to knit this thing we call civilization together. It's more than that, because we don't need other people. As you say, Brooklyn, in this age, in the modern age, we don't really need other people. We could get along quite well without people in our lives, no problem. But in actual fact, it's funny that we seem to be better versions of ourselves when we relate to others kindly. We seem to have, and when I say better versions of ourselves, you know, what I mean is, like, holistically a little bit more balanced and harmonious within ourselves. Like philosophers in the past have often talked about, what is the best. And it's not about pleasure, it's not about success, it's about contentment, it's about happiness, it's about fulfillment. There's a word in ancient Greek philosophy, eudaimonia, and it's like a flourishing contentment. There's no direct translation to English, and that's worrying. That the thing which is actually most important to ourselves, in how we live within ourselves, doesn't have a direct translation to English, so we don't have a word to fit it. Some people say pleasure, some people say success, etc. Whatever it means to you, but essentially it's meaning. And at the end of the day, a kinder life is a more meaningful life. And I think one of the reasons is that, and I don't mean to get too personal, but I've had my demons in the past where I felt like I was locked into myself. I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to be here. But the more I was kind, the more I received kindness, the more it drew me out of myself, the more I felt like I belonged in the world. Because at the end of the day, like we were talking earlier, when a child is born and their mother, their parent, gives the love to that child, that is the other coaxing us to come into the world. So when I didn't want to be in the world anymore, and I felt kindness, and I gave kindness, I was being coaxed into the world again. It was like being born again. And it did genuinely feel like, you know what, I actually belong. And that's what it is. A kind world is a world that feels like home. It makes you or helps you feel like you belong here. And at the end of the day, if something helps you make you feel like you belong, it's giving you something back of life, and it's giving you a place in life to live a better life. I guess that's why kindness is really important. I don't have to be kind. There's no way I have to be kind. But you know what? At the end of the day, like Maury Schwartz says, without love, we're just birds with broken wings. Birds can survive perfectly well with a broken wing and in the nest the whole time, being fed all the time, or it can, hop along. But my God, can't we fly if we have both wings fixed? And with love and kindness, we can fly, not just hop along on the ground and survive. We can live. And that's what kindness can do for us. It can help us to live, not just get along, not just survive, but bring us out of ourselves and encounter the other and live and love with others in the life that we're living. So
I feel like when people are kind, truly kind, and not manipulative ways, just like authentically kind, it puts people at ease. You're not fearful of their judgment or criticism, or like, oh, they're going to be mean to me, or they're not going to like me or accept me. When people are just kind, it's like, wow, feel that sense of like safety, and now I'm just sort of free to be who I am, and learn how I want to learn, and experience life how I'm experiencing life, or how I'm meant to experience life, and have these experiences without the without that layer of fear that just sort of like keeps people from being who they truly are.
mm-hmm.
How
Yeah.
many people are trying to do things that they want to do, but they're so intimidated, or whatever, because people are just like competitive, or well, you got to prove your worth. It's like, if you just open up to kindness, and it doesn't mean make everything easy for everybody or whatever. Life's never going to be easy, but if we operate on a level of kindness and respect and love with one another, we would blossom so much differently.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I honestly believe that, and it's slightly controversial opinion, and I've had a lot of people argue with me on this or disagree with me on this point, but I genuinely believe that everything is love. Love is everything, and I'm not like quoting a Beatles song. I sound like I'm full of cliches this evening, but what I mean is that, for example, everything, even the worst things in this world, are done out of love. And for example, when in most cases, for example, when someone hurts another person, or when someone, even the worst people in the world, someone like Hitler, for example, he did it because he was trying to envision a more perfect world for his people, a safer world for his people, And in doing that, he created hell on earth. There's this great quote that says, "You just have to be sure enough of creating heaven to raise hell on earth." And sometimes people twist love so much that it becomes evil. And that's one of the problems in this world, is that people unlearn how to love and live kindly. They unlearn it into a twisted way. And they say, well, do you know what? Yeah, I need to look after my family, so I need to go out and make a killing. Or I need to go out and do this, or I need to go out and do that. Or you know what? I need to be happy in myself, so I need to steal that, and I need to. But at the end of the day, this is just, there's an inherent violence, I suppose, taught in us, that we need to be survivalists, and we need, it's eat, kill or be killed out there, and I just detest this idea that it's kill or be killed. At the end of the day, what we need to be focusing on is how to untwist that twisted love into a pure form of kindness and say, you're right, you do want the best for your people, but your people are all people. So let's do what's best for everyone. Let's just be kind to everyone. And it has to start with your everyday life. You can't be, turning around and saying, what's best for me is that you don't have the same as me. That's how you get inequality in society. That's how you get problems. And that comes back to, one of your original points there, talking about in this modern world with so many people on the internet, how do we maintain this kindness, or how do we try and encourage or inspire this kindness? Through everyday interaction. There is zero reason why I should be talking to you right now. You're an ocean and a continent away from me, and we may never ever meet. But that's not the point. The point is the kindness that we share brings out better selves in us, and it may inspire other people to live kindly as well, or help them. And that's a great motivating factor. And it makes me optimistic that the world is a warmer than a colder place. And I love that idea. And you know what? Even if it's wrong, I'd rather live and die with that falsehood than some kind of illusion that it's a cold, harsh, kill or be killed kind of world. You know?
Do you feel like before you said that people have this twisted idea of love, which is motivating them to do terrible things? Would you say that's a twisted love, or would you say that is something else mistaken as love? Because to me, that's fear. Those actions are coming out of fear. It's a fearful idea or place of origin, and you're slapping the label of love on it, which is what confuses people. They think they're doing it out of love or out of goodness, but really it's out of fear. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, but what, at the end of the day, a person who has fear has to have something to care about enough to fear for it or about it. And that's the problem, is that when you have something you care for or love in your life, when you have a meaning, and that's fantastic. But when you begin to fear around that, and fear drives you to do things that you otherwise wouldn't and shouldn't, then we have a problem. So you look at today's world, where you have someone in Russia right now who's saying, I fear that NATO's coming after my people, so I'm going to invade the Ukraine. And it's a care for his people, an illusion of a care for his people that he's turning into fear, which he's turning into violence, which he's turning into hatred, and it's making the world a worse place. So again, there's kind of like a care that's twisted through love, twisted through fear into hatred and into negativity. And I think that one of the lovely reasons we're put here is to try and help people find a simpler, more holistic, and more wholesome form of just being kind to each other. If we were just all a little bit simpler and humbler in our kindness, I think the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, I think that people, we, including myself, always including myself, you have to pay attention to selfishness, because there's a very fine line between oh, I love you and I don't want anything bad to happen to you, so I'm going to keep you inside all of the time and you'll never have the opportunity to experience the world, but you'll be safe because I love you. That's selfishness. It's not love. And even though the idea is coming from a place that is not hateful or, ill intended, love is not that. Love is selfless, always. So if you once you start incorporating this selfishness into it, then that's the ego um, coming in, and you're sort of living this uh, untrue representation of the idea of love. So I feel like it's really important to use the word love in the appropriate places. Um, For instance, I have kittens. Most of you guys know, my followers know, I have kittens and they're inside the house, but they just got their last shots and they're curious and they want to go outside. I have been hesitant about this because there are cars, there are dangers that they could get into, and if anything happened to them, it would break my heart completely. But I recognized in myself the selfishness of things that my mother used to do. You're not allowed to do that because I don't want you to get hurt. So it's like I spent my entire life sitting on the sidelines simply because my mom was afraid of something happening to me. And I realized that in myself. And I was like, these cats, they have everything they need. They are better prepared to do whatever they need to do out in nature than I could ever fathom. So I let one out with me. I was outside and she was great. She had so much fun. And I sat back and I saw the joy that she was having chasing the little flies and the blades of grass. And that filled me up with love. And I was like, this is loving her, letting her be herself, letting her be free the way she's meant to be and not being selfish with her. And I just feel like you have to be really aware of that. Love can never be selfish. And once it starts getting to the point of selfishness, it's no longer love. I feel very strongly about that.
Well, I think you've really brought us right back to the core of Levinas. What you just said there, if love is selfish, it's not really love. And that's exactly, if one could possess, grasp, and know the other, it would not be the other. So, and that's who we're talking about today is Emmanuel Levinas, and that's the core of him is love someone freely. Because don't there's a great book, Khalil Gibran, The Prophet, and he says, I think it's I'm gonna try and I'm gonna maul the quote because I'm trying to remember from memory. I didn't write it down, but um, make not a bond of your love. Let love be the sea between the shores of your souls. That's what it should be. Is that you're two separate countries, and love should be a division, a beautiful division, but a division nonetheless that brings you together separately. I know it sounds like a contradiction in terms, but that's really important when it comes to relationships, any relationships, and it comes down to, when parents, for example, and I love this example, I may be speaking slightly from personal experience, but I love the example of that when a child grows up and becomes an adult, one of the most difficult things, particularly in the Western world and generally, one of the most difficult things is for a parent to try and transition into relating to their child as a peer, as an adult, due all the respect that they are required of as an adult, dignified, respected, and that's quite difficult. You see that with parents who are in their 70s and 80s still talking to children in their 40s and 50s like they are small children, still patronizing them, still talking down to them, and they may have lived experiences that are incredible. So when it comes to those kind of relationships and interrelations, I try to keep that in mind when I engage with children as well, or older people, that this is a person infinitely other to me, that they are My 3-year-old nieces that who I was engaging with, they're no less than I am. Why would I talk down to them? You know, we should always treat people with respect. And that's the heart of Levinas right there, is treat them with respect, but also allow people to grow into new forms of how they can be infinitely. So when a person grows up as an adult, they become an adult. Treat them as an adult if you want. But, you know, at the end of the day, don't capture them in, you are my child. How dare you speak to me like that? Which a lot of parents will do. Well, you know what? When adults engage with each other, that's how they do. So that's important. Respect for elders is nice, but not if it means disrespect for individuals.
It's almost like we should enjoy the witnessing of others. You know, like focus yourself. Don't interact with people for what you can get out of it, but truly just allow yourself to be present and enjoy witnessing them be what they are without mucking it up with yourself.
Exactly the same as you and the kittens. Like when you let that kitten out, did you take a step back and watch her enjoy her experience?
And that is
you
what
weren't in the
brought
middle of it
me
holding her
comfort.
going, no, the road is over there, don't go over there. So, you know, you reveled in the infinite other. You reveled in the potential for that kitten to go out into the world and experience it as herself, not as an infantile thing that constantly requires care. And that's beautiful. But sometimes we enforce those, again, the shackles of relationships on people to try and say, no, this is not what you are. So for you to act any differently is for you to be a different person, and I don't want you in my life. So that's that whole idea of you know, capturing people in those labels. For me, that's where you get the violence from. You know, that's not physical violence, but metaphysical violence that Levinas talks about.
I know you are 5 hours ahead, time wise.
Well, I'm not too bad. It's 10:33 here. So yeah, no, but a fantastic conversation as always, Brooklyn. As
Yeah.
always.
It's just a really good reminder to remember who you are, and then in remembering who you are, remember others as what they are. And I don't know, it's just something that we should think about every day.
Yeah.
For others, in spite of
I
myself, from myself.
yeah. I'm very bad at it myself. Like I'm constantly, you know, so since learning about Levinas and reading Levinas, you know, I've tried to incorporate him into my life and his ideas into my life and how I relate to other people. Sometimes with positive and negative results. Sometimes it's, you know, damaged certain relationships in my life because I refuse to engage in those roles, because I find those labels distasteful to use. And people find that unusual to relate to, but that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But the other thing is that I'm very bad at doing it myself. And, you know, you pick that point up really well, that it needs to also be on yourself, that you don't totalize on yourself, don't label yourself too. You need to respect yourself as infinite, as an infinitely potential person, and allow yourself the freedom to grow and be whatever you can be and what direction you want to go. And that's beautiful. That will free you.
It does. It like lifts the rigidity that need to control. You know, and I think that naturally just sort of makes you more kind because you're at ease. You're more at ease than you are when you are trying to perpetuate these ideas that things need to be this way. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I've been telling myself for this for 20 years. So if you figure out how, let me know, will you?
Meditate.
Can I ask, do we have any interesting comments or questions from our engagers tonight? Or
Over on this end, people have been wonderful.
Lovely.
Let's see. I don't think, does anyone on my end have any questions or input that they would like to share before we conclude this
I want to
podcast?
thank everybody as well for tuning in. It's been lovely to have you listening to us waffle on about Emmanuel Levinas,
It
20th
truly
century
has.
philosopher.
Truly.
And thank you, Brooklyn, for the company. As always, really wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes, yes. Another fantastic discussion. So I don't know, next month we'll be back on,
Mhm.
and hopefully we'll get the YouTube link up. I want to put it in my Linktree account, so that if you guys ever want to check out the other shows that we only have one other one right now, but in the future we will have more. And so if you'd like to check it out, it will be in the Linktree. So until next time, we'll see ya.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Good night from Ireland.